News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening. The latest GB News at 11 o'clock. And Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are now the final two contenders to become the next leader of the Conservative Party and ultimately the new Prime Minister. Tory members now have until the 5th of September to decide which one will replace Boris Johnson. Penny Mordaunt was knocked out of the leadership race after scoring the fewest votes out of the three. And Boris Johnson has made his last appearance at Prime Minister's Questions in the Commons today, where he says he's proud of what he achieved.
We got Brexit done. He voted against it 48 times. We got this country fast out of COVID in spite of everything he would have kept, and when he would have kept us in lockdown. We're fixing social care, Mr. Speaker, when they have no plan and no ideas of their own. We've restored our democracy and our independence. We've got this country through COVID, and I'm proud to say that whether it comes to tackling climate change or sticking up for Ukraine, we have led the world on the international stage.
Boris Johnson in the Commons today. Well, in international news, Ukraine's First Lady has appealed to the United States for more defence systems to help defeat Russia. Olena Zelensky urged the US Congress to provide more air support in the fight against President Putin, now in its 5th month, saying weapons could help assure victory. The US has already donated over £6.5 billion in security assistance since the war began. The wife of Ukraine's President, Zelensky, who received a standing ovation, asked how many more families would be destroyed by war.
Але, на жаль, війна ще не закінчилася.
The war is not over. The terror continues. And I appeal to all of you on behalf of those who were killed, on behalf of the people who lost their arms and legs, and those who wait for their families to come back from the front. I'm asking for weapons. Weapons that won't be used to wage a war on somebody else's land, but to protect one's home and the right to wake up alive in that home.
Here, the funeral for cancer campaigner Dame Deborah James has taken place in West London. The podcast host and mother of two, known as Bowel Babe, died last month at the age of 40 after being diagnosed with bowel cancer in 2016. Her husband and her son were among those who carried the wicker coffin, adorned with the rose that bears her name, into St Mary's Church in Barnes. And within the last hour, England are through to the Women's Euro 2022 semi-finals after beating Spain 2-1. Both sides were drawn in the final minutes of the match, but England took the lead in extra time in front of a record crowd. Almost 29,000 spectators came to see the game at the Amex Community Stadium in Brighton. The Lionesses now face either Sweden or Belgium in the last 4 in Sheffield next Tuesday. Well done to them. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Headliners.
Hello, welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello. Hello. I was waiting for some sort of... There's normally like an adjective, but it's simply our names now.
It's changing every night at the moment. They're really keeping us on our toes.
You don't need
adjectives. Where I stood up and had to make sure I was wearing trousers. No longer. That's gone.
No trousers anymore.
My own parents watch this show occasionally, and so far the main feedback I've had is that when I wear light-coloured trousers, it looks as if I'm naked under the desk. So not to do that.
And that's a bad thing.
That's why my parents tune in.
Is it?
In the hope
that they will get to see...
It's time we're going to be naked tonight.
We get to see a bit of chicken flesh.
Can I just say well done for surviving the country being literally on fire?
It was literally on fire, yeah. Actually, it was uncomfortably warm, but it did annoy me because I'm always anti-warm, whereas my wife forces me to take holidays in countries during the summer quite often where she goes to that temperature, 40 degrees in the middle of Italy or something, and says, this is lovely, this is great, stop complaining. And yet when it comes to Britain, she's all complaining.
She
moans. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, mate. I'm going to be camping the next couple of days.
Are you? Where you going?
Go 5 kids to this festival stand and calling. But I've just been packing the car today.
What kind of masochist are you to have 5 kids and go, this isn't hellish enough? What about if we couldn't shower and all had to stay in the same transparent
That's
pot?
exactly what it is. This is my last bit of air-conditioned respite before the last time I'm clean for 3 or 4 days.
Why haven't they got blackout tents yet either? That's a big thing.
Well, because I guess it makes it hotter.
Oh, would it?
Yeah.
But you get woken at 5 a.m., don't you? And then you start to hear the cows.
It's a nightmare. I'm terrified. It's going to be horrible.
Have you managed to continue losing weight? That's the main thing.
Yes. As you can see now, I'm practically not here
Have
anymore.
you got your diet book?
I don't even need that anymore. Don't even need it.
OK, let's have a look at the front pages, gentlemen, before we investigate these stories in detail. We kick off with the Daily Mail. They have Truss. I'll hold an emergency tax cut budget. Well, that's an exciting proposition. The Mail seem to be in favour of Truss, who they regard, I think, as a little bit drier than Sunak. The Daily Telegraph have Advantage Truss. They're going with the hangover of Wimbledon there. Advantage Truss in the race to be PM, and a photograph of her being almost applauded onto the stage, it seems. Also, Europeans urged to turn off lights amid fears Putin will cut off gas. Not sure those two things connect one another. The Independent, a fresh start for Britain, ? The Independent probably doesn't think they do represent that, I would imagine. A summer of vicious infighting lies ahead for the Tories, they think, and The Guardian as well. Blue on blue dogfight. Well, they're hardly likely to be electing a Labour leader, are they? Sunak and Truss face off, and a caricature of Margaret Thatcher there, who no doubt many are noticing Liz Truss seems to want to channel. Financial Times also have Truss starts a slim favourite over Sunak in two-way dash for number 10. The colour balance on that photograph is quite remarkable and makes Sunak look a healthy tan and Truss a rather ghostly figure. The Times, Sunak pick me or lose power, as in control over the country, rather than he's threatening the Putin approach, I would assume, and breeze through broader control in contactless corridors. Interesting. Daily Express, farewell Dame Deborah and farewell Boris. Parting shot at Rishi and a hint, I'll be back. That's the hasta la vista quote from the Terminator film. And finally, the Daily Star, they've gone with a quote from a Netflix executive to the effect that there will be no further mainstream television channels at all within the next decade. It's good night from me and good night from him. That's not relating to Prince Andrew and Prince Harry, who you can see at the top of the page there. So those are the front pages. Let's see what's inside. I think our first story is going to be Tories bracing for the nastiest leadership campaign in the party's history. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, so Sunak and Truss, it was 137 votes to 113 in the end. I personally think that the Tories made a massive mistake not putting Kemi
this channel's choice.
Not through. I think, and I say that as a Labour supporter because I'd be, first of all, very interested. I like what she said. I'd be very interested to see what she would have done with it. And on top of that, I think she would have forced Labour to sort itself out, to get away from the identity politics and to actually deal with issues. And I think it's such a wasted opportunity for this country for raising everybody's game. So now we're stuck with these two. And
it's so often the case, isn't it? You feel some excitement when there's a leadership election of these kinds, and you think and then it just drizzles out, and you're left with a very meek, a very milquetoast sort of advance.
Oh, I mean, the one good thing is that Dominic Cummings is back on the scene.
Yeah.
Supposedly supporting Rishi Sunak, and he's now sort of leaking, or he's putting stuff in his blog about Truss and saying how she was a big leaker.
Yeah.
I've missed him. I've got to be honest, I've missed the guy.
He's an intelligent sort of analyst, certainly. I don't know whether he was a brilliant strategist exactly, but he could certainly tell you what was going on.
Yeah. But they're saying that that Truss has the advantage with the members.
Yeah.
And I suppose the members...
As it were.
Yeah, as it were. And Sunak doesn't, because he's sort of seen as quite a high tax figure.
Yeah.
And now it's all about whether he can reverse that or not. But he said during the latest television debate, he turned to supposedly Truss and said, "Why are we doing this?" And I'm just thinking, why are you doing it? If I was a multi-millionaire... He obviously doesn't have a real love for it, because he said that if he doesn't win, he's just going to stop being an MP. So I don't think it's just like coming from some massive passion of his.
Well, I suppose a lot of people thought that Johnson had written his ambitions on the back of an envelope, and that was what was wrong. Go on, Nick.
Sorry, I thought Rishi meant why we're doing these debates, because they're not efficacious.
No, of course not.
Oh, it was a joke. I thought you literally thought it. Sorry.
No,
you did it so deadpan.
Yes.
You delivered it so well.
Debates, though, was ridiculous, wasn't it? The idea that any of us have any impact.
Yeah. Although they were quite amusing. I mean, I question the idea that this is the nastiest campaign ever. I mean, the Thatcher time felt pretty nasty to me, and also... John Major, it wasn't a leadership contest, but he did refer to the bastards famously. You know, that was pretty nasty stuff, and he still hasn't forgotten that. But so I'm not quite sure it's the nastiest ever. I predicted Truss would win ages ago, and I've got a tweet to prove it, but with no relish, because I was...
All you do is you put out a tweet all the time.
About everyone. Yeah, it's clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I was backing Suella, but I didn't think she should win, and now I was backing Kemi when she went out and hoping she would win. But I actually always thought Truss had more chance, and I still do because of the members, like you say. And the thing you may not have mentioned is, I don't know if you mentioned it, Rishi also wielded the knife, of course, so that's not very popular because he stabbed Johnson. True. And it is funny that Cummings is now suggesting Boris wants Truss to win because he knows she's mad as a box of snakes. So is a quote, so that Boris can then come back.
He might have a second history repeats. It's supposed to be a tragedy, and then the second time is farce, according to Marx. But he's already done the farce.
That's a
so maybe he'll come back as tragedy this time.
Can I just add for my sort of base on the internet that they're all WEF anyway.
Yeah,
they're all three of them.
Base.
I mean, more than it's getting bigger.
Carl Schwab is in charge. Whatever
and they're all on the WEF website, aren't they? And the remaining two are. So we have to get that out there.
Would you say Boris was as well? You were moving on to the second story. Boris calls Keir Starmer a pointless human bollard, which I did quite enjoy. He was on pretty good form today, wasn't he?
He was in brilliant form, and that's what they're going to miss. I mean, there's going to be no one that can do anything like that. Truss is not going to do that. Rishi's not going to do it either, and Starmer's going to suddenly look witty, and that's the danger.
I'm not sure Kemi would have done it either.
Kemi would have been better. She wouldn't have been as good as Boris. No one would be as good as Boris. Pointless human bollard. It was absolutely brilliant. Later he said, "Hasta la vista, baby." I question whether he literally thought that meant "I'll be back" and actually got it wrong. You know, because it does mean until next time. Sometime.
I think he thought he was quoting Latin, maybe.
Yeah.
But he could have just. People said he could have just gone with the full-on "I'll be back." It might have been a bit ridiculous. But
Hasten the view.
But my favourite was Beth Rigby's tweet where she talked about Boris's sign-off, "Hasta la vista, baby," the catchphrase used by Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. For so long, Johnson was the Terminator PM. Nothing could bring him down or stop him until the herd finally stampeded. Lost the metaphor at the end. Yeah. Went with the kind of shepherd thing. I don't recall Terminator being a shepherd-based movie.
I think it's The Lion King, isn't it, where Mufasa is trampled to death by stampeding wildebeest.
She almost completed an entire tweet on the same.
The other movie that he did was he said mission largely accomplished, which I don't remember. I don't remember that happening at the end. Tom Cruise just going, we sort of got it done, guys. Let's finish the film now.
That would be the English version.
Humility that would have been quite appealing if George W. Bush had said that at the end of the Iraq War.
And he did add crucially on the end of that, for now, again suggesting, is he coming back? We don't know. And that's the only way to me that Boris is really like Trump in that he may return sometime down the line. Because I think in general people said, oh, Boris is our Trump, some people said, but he's not really been, has he? Because he hasn't really been an interruption to the establishment. He's been kind of a bit of fun, but not really different.
No, I agree. It's been quite a superficial scratch, I think, on the surface of... there were times the proroguing of Parliament and so on. There were attempts to get Brexit through.
Things.
But it felt... I mean, I know a lot of his enemies used that to indicate that he was not to be trusted with Parliament, but it was pretty obvious he was doing that in order to get Brexit through for that one particular purpose. And because, whether or not that was his fault, he felt, and I think there was some justification to this, that people were losing faith in the democratic process because they had a vote for Brexit and it wasn't happening, and so that was the...
That may be, but then also threatening to break international law.
Yeah.
With a thing. I mean, these are, and adding on top of that his numerous other fibs, lies.
Yes.
Across the
but
entire gamut.
Those are superficial cuts to the process. That's what I mean. He leaves. Let's say whatever you think about him. When he leaves, I think British democracy is not actually damaged in the way that you could argue Trump really was, a wreckage. Anyway, let's move on. Thursday's Times, maybe a solution to our future energy needs, Nick.
Oh, yeah. Government gives go-ahead for Sizewell C nuclear power stations. So ministers today overruled government planning inspectors, which is my favourite thing when they get overruled. And Kwasi Kwarteng said that there's a very substantial and urgent need to build this plant, which has outweighed the environmental harm. So this is us finally realising that we need nuclear power. It's like that old proverb, the best time to build a nuclear power station is 20 years ago, but the best time is now. And the reason I thought of that is you get to the next page, you think, oh, good, we're building finally nuclear. And you go, it's due to begin in 2024 and will take between 9 to 12 years. Yeah. So not exactly, not a good start, but it's not...
You're hoping the Ukraine war is finished by then?
Well, I mean, I'm saying it would have been much better to do it in the past, wouldn't it? And
then, of course.
Yeah. And then we wouldn't have... I mean, not that we're not as dependent as Germany. We're only dependent for 3% of our gas on Russia, isn't it? Versus their 40%, something like that. Can I just add one thing? Most people are saying this is a good thing, but of course you've got your environmentalists in there somewhere. Becky Spite, whose name seems quite appropriate, but it could be pronounced Spate, as in spate of horrific crimes. Becky Spate says the charity was extremely disappointed because it will affect the nature reserve. So, of course, we have to give that for balance. That the nature
RSPB, they are an extraordinarily powerful lobbying group against advance and progress of one kind or another. Yeah. What do you think, John?
Although, obviously not powerful enough this time.
No.
The energy needs are apparent to this country. I think that this is a good thing. I mean, I don't know about this specific incident, but I think it's obvious that we need more nuclear power. As you say, it's a little bit too late, but that seems to be, what happened in
Japan. Most people on this channel
are finally sort of coming around to it. But what happened in Japan a few years ago? Like that's when imagine if they'd announced this the 10 years. When it all happened.
You say what happened in Japan. You say what happened in Japan. Nothing happened. I think there was maybe one death. I mean, there are so many vastly more deaths due to oil.
Well, I think the radiation was there, and it's still within the water.
It's nothing.
There.
Honestly, trust me. Compared to the definite death toll every year from coal-fired power stations,
well, in a couple of years,
it's absolutely tiny.
When Godzilla turns up,
the problem is the reason that nuclear power doesn't get used is because people who have a green agenda don't just want to see us avoiding climate change; they want to use it in order to smuggle in socialism. That's exactly why. That's exactly why. There is only one reason.
Hey, stay impartial. Stay impartial, mate.
In every other respect, that is why. Because they want the global south to have their go. On to Thursday's Telegraph. The Royal Mail is not doing so well, Josh.
No, it's not. And as someone who bought some shares in Royal Mail when they released those shares, I was like, I wish I'd sold at sort of peak COVID time because they were flying high. They had all those free parcels going out. It was the good times. Shares are now basically going downwards. And yes, 115,000 workers are going to basically strike. And Royal Mail is saying, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to split the company up into an international firm because they are losing £1 million a day. Wow. And when you actually read about...
This is why I never send money in the post.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering why I'd never actually got it over. You still owe me that, by the way. But when you read about some of the things that they're still doing, their practices, in London, there's Mount Pleasant plant in London. It's one of the biggest in the world. And they're still sorting the parcels by hand. That seems very old school. That seems like watching it on Blue Peter when they would do how does the post work 40 years ago. That system is still ongoing.
On 34th Street.
Yeah, so essentially they've offered a pay rise, but it's not a lot. But it's contingent on restructuring, which is essentially people losing their jobs.
So Baslef don't hear about this. What do you think, Nick?
I don't have any great... it's not my area of expertise, but it seems to me when these companies, state-run things go private or private-ish, there's always seems to be they retain the inefficiencies. The trains, the post office. Yeah. They're not going to compete with the Amazons, are they? Who would?
Well, Amazon use them, don't they? A lot of my Amazon parcels Prime they come by.
That's what I'm confused about.
I think they've got their own service.
Amazon seems to have its own one that just arrives in separately now, doesn't it?
Well, Amazon is the big threat to them. But what is your base? What does your base say about this?
My base? I can't tweet during the show. I need to just quickly check with them.
Well, we're coming out to a commercial break, so we'll just take one more story and then you'll have an opportunity to check your Twitter.
Check the base.
I've got a new joke
this last story on this half is UK's part-year workers are entitled to full paid annual leave. This is another example of productivity being deprioritised, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's a story about essentially a teacher who wasn't working full time, but therefore wasn't entitled to their leave. But they've actually, I was hoping you could explain this one, Simon, because they actually won a court case.
Yeah,
and this is kind of your area.
They're saying they're entitled to the full year's leave rather than a sort of pro rata. This is essentially, if you were working 9 months of the year. And if you were normally expected to get 6 weeks holiday for a year's work, then they say 9 months of the year, well, you get 4.5 weeks holiday, something like that. But now they're going, no, you need 6 weeks holiday. Yeah. There must be a limit to it. If you work for a month of the year, you can't expect to get that entire month off.
Well, the whole thing is so alien to me, having been self-employed so much. I'm like, leave, entitled to.
I know, exactly.
You know, in our business, you take a holiday, you're gone. Are any of you guys doing Edinburgh Festival?
I've had the gig economy for 30 years, and I have I don't even notice when bank holidays come around. I'm
if you go to Edinburgh Festival, Simon, there may not be your job when you get back. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
things change so quickly.
Saying that, we have signed a contract here, and this could help us.
We're on it.
This could be about us.
Oh, good.
This could get us a bit more dosh.
It does really seem, though, I won't hold it up very long for the commercial break, and it is pretty dry, but it does seem to me kind of symptomatic of the whole culture of the country at the moment, which is, I mean, I'm sure it's like the law and the judges are just finding according to the law and so on, but there does just seem to be an endless attempt to stop any work getting done.
It doesn't feel like that, but there's also an endless attempt for employers to not hold back money from employees.
Can I just say one thing on that? There was a brilliant Twitter thread, and it was titled "Nobody's prepared to work anymore." And actually, there was examples of this in the media going back to like 1857. So people have been saying in the papers, nobody wants to do any work anymore. So I agree with you. And then I think of this thread that was ever thus.
Reassuring. Right, we've got through that lot. Things liven up a little bit after this. It's only up from here. We'll be discussing the pharmaceutical trifecta of antidepressants, HRT, and alcohol. Take in doses according to your experience. That's just what's in Nick's drink. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Thank you.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to Headliners. I am Simon Evans. I am joined this evening by Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. It's the Dream Team now, Thursday's Express, and the 90s rock band The Verve were right, it turns out. The drugs don't work, Josh.
They don't work. So new research has found that serotonin is not the key to depression, because that's why over the last, since the 90s, 1 in 6 adults now take antidepressants.
SSRIs, right?
Yeah, and 2% of teenagers are now being prescribed them as well. It's been a huge increase. But now they're saying, actually, all this research over thousands of people are saying they didn't just test this one thing. They tested This is several decades of research, by the way.
Yeah.
And
so is this a kind of meta survey, or like a big
meta survey, but also doing different things. So one of the things they did is they researched levels of serotonin in the blood, and they basically didn't discover any difference whether someone was depressed or not. So someone with low or high, or the two didn't sort of seemingly correlate to that. They also looked at studies where they artificially lowered serotonin.
Yeah.
Didn't make any impact in depression.
And are these people who are on the pills?
These are people who weren't on any pills,
Oh,
and so
okay.
they lowered serotonin. So, and then another thing that they did is that stressful life events seem to have much more importance about whether people actually get depressed or not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. So, guess what has happened? A spokesman for the Royal College of Psychiatrists says, actually, they're massively effective. Hey, Big Pharma. Got to the old.
It's very interesting, isn't it? I mean,
psychiatrist
a lot of people have been saying for decades, since it first came in, Prozac was the first big
Yeah.
one of these, right? But now there are loads of different variations on them. But when it first came in, right from the get-go, a lot of people saying, I think this is just a placebo effect, that people are being told that something is working for them. I don't know. I mean, it's never been adequately explained. I don't know, I may be getting confused, but I think they weren't even intended, they weren't even developed for this, but it was one of those things where they found that, a bit like, or I might be getting confused with the impotency one, which is Viagra.
Can't remember what it's called. Is it called Viagra?
Viagra.
Simon seems to be...
Check with your base. Check with your base, quickly.
But anyway, that often happens, and that doesn't matter particularly, but often they try things out, and if it works, then they try and work out why it might be working. Do you see what I mean? I don't know whether they've been doing that with this, but it's always been this cloud of suspicion.
I'm amazed they've got 85 to 90% of the public believing that depression is caused by low serotonin or chemical imbalance. I've never believed it personally. I'm not a doctor since the incident, but I always suspected they were harmful potentially. I mean, I knew someone who claimed their father had committed suicide because some of them can create suicidal ideation, and then we don't know what they do. Someone even admits here, we don't know what they do to the brain. I mean, that's quite important. I've always felt, go back through literature, there's always been depression. Look at Melville on the first page of Moby Dick. Ishmael talks about having the hypos, and he cures it by going to the sea. That was the old school solution. So life... It's an existential problem. We know we're going to die. There's a lack of meaning in the culture. We don't believe in God anymore. So, of course. And then you've got objectively miserable circumstances. I used to sign on in Biker in Newcastle. That's objectively miserable. Yeah. Now I do a lot better. I'm at GB, I'm working out, and now I've replaced depression with a kind of untethered anger, and it's a lot better. So my point is, if your life's going well and you're working out, you're doing your exercise and all that, then get back and say, I'm depressed. I'm not saying there's no one's depressed. I'm not trying to undermine it.
Well, it does.
But it's not as simple as take a pill.
But it does correlate with people who are unable to take those kind of measures, who are, for instance, housebound in some way or other, like who are carers and can't just leave the house and all that sort of thing. It is. I do find it interesting. You're right, but philosophers throughout the years have often been a bit prone to depression, and certainly like the big German ones who seem to sort of dominate a lot of our thought now, your Schopenhauers and your Nietzsches and so on. They didn't really live great lives. You know, they would dwell on things being bad. They would write great books about things being bad. They would present very well-articulated propositions for why things were intractably bad. But they didn't really come up with solutions, whereas people who go to the gym or just like go sea swimming every morning tend to feel good.
Well, here's a good solution. Have 5 kids.
Yeah.
You will never contemplate anything to do with existence. You will just be too busy.
The weird thing is, I mean, that is true as well, isn't it? There's much lower rates of suicide when people are busy. Yeah.
I'm so happy in my trapped
exhaustion. I also do wonder as well, though, you know, depression, I don't know if this is a bit twee or quaint, but it feels like the clue is in there. Take the pressure off a little bit. Whereas sometimes there is, you know, depression is trying to slow you down and make you take the pressure off. But if you take these pills, society says, don't worry, you can carry on working 12 hours a day and you know, trying to live at this crazy high speed that society demands of you.
It might be a sign you should do something. And I don't want to undermine anyone who's like feeling, or you know, whatever the word is, you know, not saying. There might be people out there saying, "Shut up, Nick. I'm dealing with something really bad," and it is very bad. But I'm just saying, it looks like these drugs are questionable, and it looks like the chemical imbalance thing is questionable. So there may be other solutions.
I think absolutely right. Could, in the end, turn out to be good news. On to Thursday's Guardian, a topic Nick requested to cover as it's one of his specialities. Go on, Nick.
Hormone replacement therapy to be offered over the counter in UK, yes. And this is a landmark move, a huge step forward for women's health. The first type of HRT to become available at pharmacies without prescription will be Gina 10 microgram vaginal tablets. I never thought I'd say that again on TV, but there it is. And it's, you know, it seems like a good thing. I'm no expert, as you've said there. No, I haven't tried these ones. They're not my brand, but
Are we saying, sorry, that you're saying that is where they're actually inserted, is it? They're tablets to be inserted in that particular orifice?
I'm not necessarily saying that.
It says vaginal tablets. I'm assuming it is. I didn't know that.
Oral tablets?
I think
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know because I'm not. I can't confirm. I was
base.
more interested in the. I took more interest in the overview, which is that it's generally good to me that we don't have ridiculous regulation. We don't have to get a prescription for everything.
No.
When I was in Guatemala, I didn't particularly like the crushing poverty or the armed guards or the weird tax system where you couldn't seem to save. But what I did like was the fact you could just get antibiotics over the counter, and I thought, well, why can't we have that?
And then you bought all those drugs back. It was great.
Well, exactly, and you sell them to people like you in
there are
North
websites,
London.
aren't there? HRT has been on an interesting journey. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
I sure am. It's an absolute lifesaver.
Yeah.
My wife's, I hope she doesn't mind me saying, she's perimenopausal.
Yeah.
And it's made a massive, massive difference, a massive shift. And it really can be a lifesaver.
Yeah.
The impact on women of that age for that sort of 10, 15 years, more and more information is coming out about how it fundamentally changes your biology.
Yeah, and so these treatments they can do two things, and they can do both of them, which are both good. One, they can extend the lifespan of you feeling like you have always felt and feeling happy about that, and then they can also just stop that kind of coastal shelf kind of. They can just ease it off a little bit as well, which are both good things. The only thing is, again, I think there is the potentially harmful. That you kind of go, right, you're on your HRT, you can now carry on working at a high rate and so on.
The capitalist system. You're very anti-capitalist.
And when it's just these two things have collided. But in a way, it's got to be for women to choose this. This is the point. And so these drugs are available and they can make their own choices,
Speaking of the system, can I add one thing? They did ruin it at the end by saying the announcement comes hours after ministers vowed to tackle decades of systemic and entrenched gender health inequality.
Yeah.
Hat out of a pop at men at the end, in case you forgot you were reading The Guardian.
I bet it was men who invented HRT.
Probably was. We're so...
I don't want to be...
And the tampon. We're so nice.
I read that thing when it came out yesterday, and it is pretty terrible that there hasn't been this focus on women's health specifically because they are a different sex with different needs, and it needed to be.
Well, there really was, and actually, it was a lot of women's groups that came out against HRT initially because there was a lot of evidence that it might
this
have
is
some
a wider
impact
thing
on
than
breast
it could be.
cancer and so on. But there's, the thing is, it's very often other women. In the same way, in America, everyone is convinced after Roe v. Wade that it's men trying to stop women having abortions. More women are against the easy access to abortions in America. More right-wing women. It's more of a female-led thing against. So, there's always a little bit more nuance to that. Thursday's Mail next, and we talked about chocolate wrappers last night, getting health warnings. Now it's the marketing teams for alcoholic drinks that might be headed for a meltdown, Josh.
Yeah, so they want to put alcohol in plain packaging or to be plastered with that sort of those photos that you get on cigarettes. But I think that's actually a really good idea. Like, they should have... like on bottles, whatever, they should have all those photos of drinking can cause this, and then have all these photos of people having an amazing time.
Yeah, and maybe one person in the corner not having a
exactly. But like that, like at the end of The Hangover, remember they had that photo montage. It's like, drink this, and this is you're going to get your tooth pulled out, and you're going to marry a prostitute, and you're going to adopt a kid or whatever. I think it's a great...
The great thing about alcohol, unlike, to be fair, tobacco, which does have a fairly limited range of outcomes, doesn't it? But alcohol leads to all sorts of exciting situations. Some are good, some are bad. I mean, maybe they could give you a free, half-hour, 24-hour cops.
They should all be depicted on the packet. Choose your adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
But some of the tests, did you read? I mean, some participants were asked to choose between fruit or chocolate that had a photo of a dead dog that had been abandoned on the road. I mean, you are going to be put off by that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I stand on it because... Oh, and another one was people, they canvassed some people and they said it was all about colour. Another male said colour is what attracts people. It's all about colours. I mean, that guy, his life's going to be improved by alcoholism. I mean, someone at such a low level...
I was reading this about the chocolate bars, the dead dog, and I was like, I've been dieting for a month now. I'd absolutely...
I'd eat the dead dog.
I'll eat any of it. I'll eat the dog, I'll eat the chocolate
over
bar.
a dead dog.
To me,
desperate.
The most effective thing they did with smoking was ban it from the pubs. What about banning drinking from the pubs? You have to go outside to have your drink, and inside is just a kind of silent, grim game of darts or Jenga,
but the pub is the best place to drink because actually there's kind of social...
I'm not seriously suggesting you go outside of the pub.
Becoming drunk in the expressions of your friends, it slows you down a little bit. It's the problem drinkers don't drink in the pub.
But this is a story a few days ago about how drinking in pubs has declined massively in the last 2 years or something.
And social drinking has become much more dysfunctional. And also, just to be briefly serious, the people who are problem drinkers, they're not going to be put off by this either. This is always... They always attack the kind of things that are going to make middle class, maybe working class, but just people who have a reasonable use of alcohol to improve their life at the weekend and, you know, take the edge off the day. They're going to be the ones who are going, oh, God, I can't even come home and have a drink now without being confronted with some hideous image.
You're right. It's more safetyism, and I have to say for my base that I don't like the safetyism. I'm not so libertarian that I want drugs legalised, but this does seem a touch too far.
But I think it's quite good that you can get tenants and then go, oh, it's actually Strongbow.
Yeah.
It's classy.
Thursday's Telegraph now, and the armed forces don't seem to think sex work is real work, Nick.
Yes, Telegraph. British troops banned from paying prostitutes while overseas. Doesn't mention their domestic policy there, but the Ministry of Defence has introduced a blanket ban, no pun intended, presumably, on paying... I'm on fire on this one. On paying prostitutes while overseas.
They're only banned from paying them, though. They're allowed to use them, and then they have to... Sorry,
it's in my other car keys. Yeah. It's in my other...
Tank.
Go on, tank. The policy will ensure... So it's two new policies, Simon, you'll need to note this. The policy will ensure that every allegation will be responded to no matter where the allegation takes place. And the second one is that there'll be a zero tolerance to unacceptable sexual behaviour, which is quite broad. I don't know.
I like this, a presumption of discharge. That sounds like a slightly old-fashioned attitude.
If someone's done their job right.
That was almost the fear, wasn't it?
We shouldn't pursue. Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't do this anyway. I'd be like Michael J. Fox in Casualties of War. I'd be like, no thanks, you know, when they're doing things to that woman. I'd be like, it's not my scene. And to be honest...
So you wouldn't stop it, but you'd just be like...
Well, I'd do a court case at the end. But I've backed a lot of controversial things on this show, but I don't think I'm going to die on the troops should be allowed to see overseas prostitutes killed.
Well, it used to be a big part of troop culture during the war, but I suppose it depends where they go to some extent. I mean, it was the principal means by which the British and the French interacted during the First World War, wasn't it? Sorry.
Do you hear something? No, I just heard half of Nick's base just disappear.
But seriously, I mean, they kept the British-French, Anglo-French relationships were kept alive, basically, by the time. In fact, it's the first scene as well in... All Quiet on the Western Front, isn't it, where they go away and they visit some girls, you know.
But then the question is, I think
era,
people are much more educated now as to how it's really about power.
Yeah.
And so the exploitation of and even if people seemingly want, you know, why do they want to? No one really wants to do that. They're doing it because they have no choice, ultimately.
Yeah. But I don't know if you've ever been to an army base. I've entertained a few. The squatters there don't have much choice either. They're not like all these guys who've seen the advert and gone, yeah, that's what I want. A lot of squatters haven't taken a huge amount from a wealth of career opportunities.
Yeah.
You know,
can I ask this?
90% of the world's people don't have a great deal of choice. No.
That's true. Sorry to interrupt. I got carried away because it suddenly occurred to me: how does the left reconcile? It's all about power imbalance versus sex work is great and empowering.
Well, I don't agree. I hate that stuff.
Oh, good.
That's far left.
Oh, good. Actually, you're right. I saw you crack the other day on... When I say crack, I mean you're getting gradually red-pilled on this show. It was talking about kids in schools and how they were trying to tell the kids that sex education...
I've been on this...
And you were just
I've been on this stuff for a long, long time.
I heard you say the sentence, what are they teaching our kids? I was like, Josh has gone full Daily Mail. We've done it.
No, Daily Mail has come full Josh.
T-shirt before the end of the run. Right, that's the end of this part. We've run out of stories, but join us after the break. We'll be talking about Quidditch, nature versus nurture, and why Harry Styles is on the curriculum. We are doomed as a species, but we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. I'm Simon Evans. This is Headliners. Joining me are still Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Very relieved.
Still.
We're back from a commercial break, which managed to see us talking about Tom Hardy having sex with himself. Really not sure how we got there. We kick off the final stretch this evening with the Mail. And is it now OK to say woke, go broke, Nick? This is the Netflix.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes they're so oblique, those intros. They're so almost poetic, but I don't know what they're on about. So Netflix, post-COVID slump continues. Streaming giant loses almost 1 million subscribers during spring. Not great. They've tried to sell it as a good thing. So they lost 970,000. But they tried to say it was good because it actually predicted they'd lose 2 million. It's like saying, she turned me down, but I predicted she'd slap me. Yeah. And she didn't. So it's still a win, lads. So Netflix, they're in trouble. It's go woke, go broke, some people think. And they did go backpedal a bit with the wokeness when they said to their employees, you've got to accept Dave Chappelle and things like that. You can't be total snowflake.
What are examples of their wokeness? I'm just drifting through. There's a thing in which a bloke gets pregnant called He's Expecting.
Yep.
There's an adaptation of Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's anti-racist Baby.
Yes, and then there's Meghan Markle just existing and on the platform.
Getting money for doing nothing.
Yeah. But some of their other stuff, I mean, Squid Game's pretty good, isn't it? And Sex Education is quite funny. I think.
It's a perception. Viewers have got this perception. They're saying there's patronising virtue signalling lectures. Someone else was annoyed that the Resident Evil adaptation was attacking men and being woke. There's a perception of, they're involved with Obama in some way, or they were. It's this war we have now. The war's coming between the different forms, the mainstream Disney and the Netflix, and the people like the Daily Wire. Jordan Peterson, who I'm legally obliged to mention every show, just signed with Daily Wire Plus, and he was saying they've got 890,000. Netflix still has 200 million. So there's a bit of a fight back, but
what is the Daily Wire? I thought that was like a news desk.
Daily Wire. It's interesting, Simon, because Daily Wire has launched this massive thing where they're going to do fiction movies, they're doing westerns, they're doing documentaries, they're doing kids programming in response to Disney and their sort of grooming. And the reason I bring that up is it's interesting to see Netflix failing, and are we going to have alternative channels come up to threaten them? But then again, I want to also reiterate...
I would watch Peterson 24 hours.
Well, you should. It's quite cheap and you can get it. But I don't know if we're like... Oh, and also Netflix has got this ad tier now. You pay less, but you have to watch adverts. Yeah. It's like TV.
It's going the other way.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, the big thing that we're not talking about are all the other services that came. When Netflix was getting a lot of its numbers a few years ago, it was the only service that was available.
Yeah.
It now,
took
of course,
from Blockbuster then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but now you've got Apple TV, you've got Paramount. Now just came into market. You've got Amazon. And a lot of them are doing... They've sort of upped their game. Amazon wasn't that great for a long time. Now they've sort of cracked it. So whether it is about this woke stuff or not, the quality is not there. That's the problem with Netflix. You have something like Squid Game. Why it worked was because it had a singularity of vision. It had one person thing, and it wasn't about... trying to appeal to many different people. It was like, we're going to make this for this market, and then it appealed because it was an original story. You can have something like Queen's Gambit, which is about a woman and chess and all that stuff, and it was brilliant. But it wasn't about, slamming it over the head, women are great and this and that. It was like, it told a story naturally. That wasn't about her being a woman, it was about her going... It
was actually quite an old story. Do you know who wrote it?
Yes,
Same man who wrote The Hustler, the pool movie with Paul Newman.
Newman.
They've been trying to make it for years, haven't they?
Yeah. And actually, in a way, that was a good thing about it, wasn't it? Because it felt modern, but it didn't feel like it had been driven by modern concerns. But
and they also removed films, so then you have to go to Amazon Prime, who are more likely to have it. Plus, they send you packages.
Well, that's it. The reality is you don't actually watch anything on Netflix. You go on it, you flick around for an hour, nothing you want, and then you go, I'm going to go to sleep.
I have to say, I don't want to, I think I'm allowed to just express personal preferences. I do kind of like the Amazon Prime offer now. I get Amazon Prime anyway because I just like speedy delivery is free. And you can basically rent a movie you want for a couple of quid. Most movies are on there, but you don't pay like a monthly thing. You're just paying for everything you want to watch. If I watch 2 movies a month, that seems like a pretty good...
And they do have some pretty good shows as well.
Yeah. But I think you're right, and it feels a little bit like that everything is in turmoil at the moment with media. It's the same thing if you go online, if you see a link to an article you want to read on Twitter, and then you get there and it goes, you've read three articles a month, and now you have to subscribe. You go, just let me read this. I'll pay you 25p to read. Do you know what I mean? There needs to be some kind of way of just like seeing.
Should we do a break right now, by the way?
Yeah. Anyway, Quidditch next.
Man.
This is, again, the trans wars have invaded, possibly, or have they? Is this being reached for as an excuse?
No, it isn't. They've taken the Look, I don't even like the books, or I've seen the films. I don't really care about the book, you know. But a bunch of geeks out there have created these teams based on the game in the book. I seem to remember vaguely brooms and some spinning ball or something. I don't know, whatever.
But they're not riding an airborne.
I don't know if they're sort of going whatever it is. It supposedly is actually sort of taken off as a sport. It has lots of fans, and now they were saying that the problem was that Warner Brothers owned the title, so it made it hard for them to make any money out of it. So that is part of the reason. To be fair, they're also saying that sort of 50% of the issue is that. They are saying here with J.K. Rowling's anti-trans positions. Now, anybody who's actually familiar with the debate will know that, of course, she doesn't have any anti-trans positions at all. She has pro-women's rights positions. So every time I read that, I always get angry when they kind of bring in this stuff into it. Obviously, this is happening in America, where it's a much bigger deal out there. And it's just... It's so frustrating because if you just show any of these people, why don't you actually read what she's written?
Yes.
And tell, every time you say, please, name me one transphobic thing that she said. And they never can. It's infuriating.
That's giving them too much credit because all they care about is the backlash. They don't care about what she's actually said. They care that a load of people will attack them. And to them, it's a numbers game. Although not even a numbers game, it's a loudest voices game because they think we'll get shouted out on Twitter. But as Boris said today in Parliament, which we forgot to mention, it's not Twitter that counts. What we need to do somehow, I know this is in the US, is get to the point where corporations feel more fear from doing these kind of things. You know what I mean? Because they're afraid, so they do this. They need to be punished for doing this kind of thing. They need to be rewarded for being sensible.
The interesting thing that Halifax, I don't know if you remember what happened a couple of weeks.
The pronouns.
Yeah, the pronouns thing. But then people were basically like, we're leaving and whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, good, this is going to teach them that you don't disrespect your customers like this, because the way they put out a tweet that said, yeah, we're all fine. If you don't agree with us, just leave.
Go elsewhere,
and then actually the impact of that, definitely people left, but it's not had the impact necessarily. And they were still sending letters back to people saying, you know what, if you don't agree with us, that's totally fine.
It seems like a fairly small but telling example. Mary Kimball, the Chief Executive Director of US Quadball.
Yeah.
I think they should just call it Kimball. That would solve it, wouldn't it? That'd be maybe that's where she's moving them on towards. Times next. Finally, someone is standing up for a downtrodden and arguably the politest members of Parisian society.
Right, well, this is left-wing Paris councillor mocked for saying rats are victims of prejudice. So, of course, the left are continuing their path towards supporting degeneracy. They already sort of support anyone that's against the prevailing culture, criminals, anyone. Now it's rats they've moved on to, inevitably. And this person is called Dushka Markovic, perhaps an apt name, not for me to say. Of course, this person has said that I prefer to call them surmulots, which has a less negative sound. So we're not allowed, it's typical lefty semantics. We're not allowed to say bad things about rats.
I'd say this is, every time you say left, it's far left, mate. It's far left. It's far left, idiot. This is like
my base will be the judge of that.
So this is a socialist Greens coalition.
The origin of the left, isn't it, Paris?
Josh, you're on the right now. Embrace it.
Surmulo. I just want to say it's surmulo, I think.
I'm sorry. I'm from the north.
And it means sort of
it's an oversized field mouse. And my wife...
I even looked that up, and the internet has lied to me.
My in-laws had a house in France, which they bought with an inheritance and then kept for a few years. And when my wife used to go down there in the summer, it was always infested with surmulo, and they would you'd have to root them out of the barn and everything. They are slightly cuter than the regular rats.
Yeah, but that's just choosing to call them that. Well, OK,
well,
I don't know if they actually are.
It's not just that. But essentially what it is she's basically covering her job. Her job is to deal with the rat problem, and they have a massive issue over there, especially what happened because they're redoing the metro, but also because during COVID, it sort of pushed a lot of them up to the surface. Schools are closing, like nurseries, they're coming out in the nursery.
Really?
All this stuff. So her job is to exterminate them, and she's basically going, no, let's be friends with them and coexist with them and whatever. But then Paris has got real problems at the moment under this mayor. And there was a thing
Is
a
that
few
who
weeks...
this is? Dushku is the
Yeah,
man?
no, this is a councillor, but Anne Hidalgo, there's been some real problems along the lines of San Francisco, what happened when they voted in a very far-left mayor, sort of, and legalised drugs, essentially, and all this stuff. And there's been a lot of problems in Paris at the moment.
I mean, it's always said, isn't it, it's the beginning of a genocide when you compare humans to rats. But I think it's OK to compare rats to rats, isn't it? That's probably a reasonable way of setting your mindset before you move on. On to the Times, Josh's favourite topic. This is sport.
Oh, gosh, yes. So, Dina Asher-Smith, she qualified the 4th fastest in
Is she British?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. This is the women's... This is running.
She is. I'm hearing in my head that
she is.
On GB News, John.
GB News, yes, she is. And brilliant. And she's British. and she's qualified. And the women's 200 metres, that's where they run for 200 metres. And she did it in a really fast speed and whatever. So the interesting thing is that she's going to be up against someone... who I think this is the first time that Nambia's Beatrice Masalingi, who is a DSD athlete.
What does that mean?
It means that she has a intersex condition, which I think they changed the rules, the World Championship, Athletic Champion, changed the rules so that anybody running 400 metres or over wouldn't be able to do so now if they had testosterone in their body because of this condition. In the women's race. So what's happened is a bunch of people have instead gone to 200 metres to deal with that. And guess what? They've got testosterone in their system and they're doing great.
I would have thought it would make more difference at the sprint speeds than it does, because that's more about explosive muscle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, long term. You know, the thing is, they've got this wrong for so long, for so many years.
Lord Coe is president of the World Athletics. He should be capable of conducting this with some sensible...
But I'd just like to say, this is a separate issue to transgender people in sport. Trans activists always try to conflate...
Biologically
they're always trying to conflate the two. Hey, what about people with intersex conditions? And I believe that people with intersex conditions always say that they hate being brought into this argument. Intersex.
Not internet conditions.
Internet condition, yes. Well, that's good. That's why I watch a lot of internet.
On to the Telegraph. And who knew the 80s hit movie Twins with Danny DeVito was so prescient, Nick?
Yes, identical twins separated as toddlers develop striking differences in IQ. So IQ, of course, a very controversial subject, because if you start saying there's inherent differences in IQ, like Charles Murray did in the bell curve, you get accused of all sorts of things, racism, eugenicism, when he was actually just trying to help and suggest policies. But, you know, and there's also IQ inequality. You know, people like Zuckerberg tend to do well because they're very smart. Mine's a mere 137 on the last test. So I'm just down here with Josh at GB. But although, you know, Jewish people tend to do very well on those things, but we don't want to get into that.
But getting on to the story.
I got off to the... I got off.
Korean twins separated at birth.
Two Korean twins separated at birth. And they were...
not at birth.
Not at birth, they're 2 years old. One of them was in Seoul, and one of them went to the US because she got lost, essentially. Came back 40 years later, and one of them had a higher IQ, and the one from the US had a 16 points lower IQ than the one from Seoul, which is quite funny. But then it turned out that she had a concussion, several concussions, and also didn't have confidence doing tests, so it could easily be attributed to that.
I don't know. I think this is definitive proof that America makes you thick.
Yeah, well, it's certainly tempting to see it that way. But what I think is bizarre is it's being presented as it's some original. They have done thousands of twin studies. Twin studies underpin pretty much all of the research that you're talking about that's been controversial. There's a man called Robert Plomin, who is an American based in... I think it's King's London in Denmark Hill in South London, who has written a book about it, Blueprint, in which is just... There's so many studies. There's nothing new about this, except that this other twin has this remarkably different, 16-point IQ gap, which has made the story. And then, as you say, you read on and go, mind you, she has been, dropped on her head multiple times. I mean, which is...
Well, you can see why, given how controversial it is, there's an effort to say we'd like it more if it was nurture. So there's an effort to say, oh, it'd be good if it was nurture, but it's unclear.
It seems to be actually what they're saying is that there definitely is nature.
Yeah.
And when you read something like this as a parent, you just think, what's the point?
What is the point? Don't waste your money.
What is that?
Don't waste your money on fancy schools when you could be spending it on
when my wife says,
making lifetime memories.
Let's not argue in front of the kids. I'm like, no, let's argue in front of the kids. That doesn't make any difference.
They did have similar traits and got on well, which was interesting.
That's what I'm saying. It's nature.
Yeah.
Most
of it is nature. Well, there is also something called the non-shared environment, and it's like the dark matter of psychology. Nobody knows what it is, but it isn't your house, it isn't your school, it isn't how you raise them, it isn't how you dress, it's not whether you sing them like clever
Read to them
nursery
every
rhymes,
night
read
and
to them
all-
every
yeah.
night, teach them to play piano. It's something else. It's not nurture.
That explains my second son.
Yeah. World chess champion, talking of IQ, Magnus Carlsen is probably one of the most intelligent young men on the planet, but he's had enough of playing chess.
Yeah, 31 years old. He's won it 5 times. Well, undisputed king of chess. And he basically said, yeah, I'm not going to bother playing this year. He's not going to contest his world championship. And that's it. He just says he doesn't particularly like chess.
That's one comment. The only thing, what's happened here is he's applied that very logical mind that's so good at chess to the question, why play chess? And he's come up with, there is no reason.
A slightly more promising young man is Harry Styles, who has got his own degree now.
The Mirror's saying has a university course in the US dedicated to him, and of course they're calling it an exciting course called The Cult of Celebrity Identity and the Internet. And of course, this is Harry Styles from One Direction. And if you take that course, your life is only going in one direction, I have to say. And this, of course, comes from... I checked out the guy, the professor or academic. He has got a very anti-racism, rainbowy flag bio. And he said that, just out of interest, and he said that he's got tenure now. So he's like, this is what tenure looks like. Let's go. So he's basically saying he can do what he wants now.
I think that Korean twin took this course, and that's why she's 16 points lower now.
It is a serious point. I mean, people are going to spend money taking this course. And come out
Hundreds of thousands of pounds they do in America.
And be utterly unemployable, a complete waste. They will realise themselves after 3 months. Is it just some sort of... Does it actually exist, do you think, seriously?
Yeah, it does. But they've also got ones about Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Kanye West.
Thursday's Guardian has another dismal story from the American educational system in which a Nazi symbol has appeared over a primary school. Is that right?
Yes. So it's not the swastika. It's basically like the eagle, the sort of Nazi eagle. It looks a bit like the Nazi. It was based on the American eagle, but it looks like the way that it's sort of designed. It looks like the Nazi one, especially when the
there it is. We have a picture.
Oh, there we go. So ES next to each other. There's a lot of straight lines in there.
Yeah.
That looks not good to me.
Especially and if someone screen caps this, it doesn't look great either.
And it's opposite a synagogue as well. So that's not good. They're going to change it and stuff like that. But supposedly that area, this is Cobb County in Georgia, it's got a lot of anti-Semitic instances increasing. And I'd just like to say separately, because this wasn't covered anywhere else, a report came out a few days ago in the UK that it's gone up 5-fold. UK incidents in
anti-Semitism
in British schools have increased fivefold over. Tripled in the last 5 years.
Tripled in the last 5 years.
That's what's happened.
And is there any particular reason for that, do you think?
Yeah, because there's a lot of anti-Semitic people out there.
OK. What do you think, Nick?
Well,
not about anti-Semitism, but about this particular...
Ego is not that much. I think it might have been a story that occurred a while ago on Free Speech Nation and came back. I'm not certain. It just said here they were trying to represent the eagle soaring into excellence and honour the history of our great school. But you can't really mess around with the eagle. You've got to be careful with that eagle.
The thing about
logo.
the eagle is, just to offer a word of defence, or at least to say that it was almost certainly ill-advised, and I believe it is opposite a synagogue as well, in which case, that doubles it down. But the American eagle is a valid... eagles have been a major symbol of national supremacy, national authority, national... people like the bird of prey, generally speaking.
But if it had been a nice sort of wingy...
No, but they always stand like that.
No, but this was like sort of straight lines, and this is our eagle, as opposed to...
Evans defends Nazi logo. That's all I'm seeing on the clip.
Welsh eagle, that's what I'm going for. Well, that is all we have time for this evening. Thank you so much to my guests, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Join me tomorrow. I will be in the company of Josh once again, and Sajula Kershi will be filling a Nick Dixon-shaped hole. We will see you there. Stay cool this evening and have a very good night. Good night.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests.